Just give it a minute or two for people to actually join. Hi everyone, you're very welcome to the Farm Zero C webinar. My name is Gavin Hunt. I'm the Farm Zero C project manager working with Biorbic, and I'm based full-time here on the farm in Shannock. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers today from the project, from all of our research partners and industry partners. But just to start, I'm going to share a rough agenda so you guys have a small bit of housekeeping. So we're going to start with a welcome and project overview by Enda Buckley and Kevin O'Connor, and then we're going to go through our 5 work packages on the project. Work package 1, annual emissions by Hazel Costigan in Moore Park. Work package 2, looking at biodiversity, which is going to be presented by Keen White and Trinity. Work package 3, looking at LCA and app development, led by Alejandro Vergara in University College Dublin, looking at renewables and biorefinery. And social innovation blueprint is led by MTU with Teresa, James, and myself. And we're going to have a rough update then from the Shannock Farm update from myself and John McNamara. And then we're going to have about 25 minutes for questions and answers at the end. So we're going to take all questions and answers and discussion at the end of the webinar. So down at the bottom of your screens, there's a questions and answers tab. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please just feel free to add those in there, and we'll get to those at the end. So I'm going to hand over now to Enda Buckley, who's Director of Sustainability in Carbery, just to welcome you to the webinar.
Thanks, Gavin. Good morning, all. Delighted to be here. So look, this is a very important project for Carbery. When the project was first conceived, there was a number of objectives. One was to, I suppose, show that a dairy farm could decarbonize radically. We wanted the project to be a beacon for the industry, and I suppose we also wanted to offer hope for the sector. So as you get the various updates from the team this morning, you can judge whether we have delivered on those objectives or not. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Kevin O'Connor, who's the Director of Biorbic and the academic lead on the project.
Thanks very much, Enda. Yeah, my name is Kevin O'Connor. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about, very quickly, a short introduction to Farm Zero C, which was funded by Science Foundation Ireland under their challenge-based funding scheme, where we built a challenge team to address climate or climate change. Our project was building a climate-neutral dairy farm. So it's very much a collaboration. It's really important that we recognize that nobody has all of the answers. It's about working together, trying to find solutions. So as Biorbic, I'm Director of Biorbic, and Biorbic is very much of a collaboration. We have multiple different academic groups, but also we collaborate with industry, and Carbery are the industry partner, but they also represent their farmer cooperatives. And really what we want to do is create an economically viable, climate neutral, and also nature positive dairy farm. So it's very much about taking a holistic approach. You see this from the work packages. It's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's about measuring things on the farm. It's also about increasing the health and resilience of the farm for now and into the future. And so as Enda said, what we really sought to be was a beacon for sustainable agriculture, and also to change the narrative that farmers really are at the center of the solutions. Yes, farming has many challenges, but they represent communities. They're like us, they represent their families. It's about succession, and how do you create a future where farmers are actually part of the solution and not looked upon as being part of the problem. And like I mentioned, we have multiple different partners, but it's important to mention as well that we also have international partners like Grassa, who are a biorefining refining company, and James Gaffey from MTU, who's a national and international leader on grass biorefining, was able to bring Grassa, who have biorefining technologies and grasses, into the project as well. And we've also recently signed a collaborative agreement with AIB as part of the Farm Zero C project. So it's a 250 acre farm. It's got 250 cows on it. It was actually established in 2011 as part of a joint program between Teagasc and Carbery, and is owned by the 4 West Cork co-ops. That's Bandon, Drina, Barrow, and Lissavard. And so it's a heavily stocked farm, and it is a demonstration farm, has been a demonstration farm since it was established in 2011, and on a grass-based system. And it's really is looking at profitability and economic sustainability in this type of farming system. And so what has happened now as a result of Farm Zero C is that it's pivoting towards not just economic sustainability, but also environmental sustainability and social sustainability about the farmer and the farming community. And so it's about maintaining profitability, but also becoming climate neutral. And we also have 10 monitor farmers who adopt early adopters of the technology. And the objectives there with them is that they learn from Chinook in reducing carbon footprint, improving or maintaining biodiversity, and also improve air and water quality. And so Alejandro Vergara, who's on the call as well today, was very much instrumental in building the life cycle analysis with his supervisor, Dr. Fionnuala Murphy. And so it is really around looking at what goes into the farm, what comes out of the farm, whether that's emissions, renewable energy, carbon sequestration in soil or emissions, looking at biorefining and what biorefining can bring in terms of the carbon footprint of the farm and new and diversifying technologies, but also looking at biodiversity. Cian White's on the call as well, biodiversity and natural capital. Often biodiversity is kind of looked at as almost an added bonus, but in actual fact, it's a very much a needed quantity within the farm. And also, of course, looking at air and water quality. And really, that's the focus of the project. You'll hear from Hazel and Chagas, you'll hear from Alejandro, from Cian, from Teresa as well, because Teresa was building with James and MTU, building the business model as well. So if you put all these things together, how do they come together, and can you actually provide a future business plan? So I'll stop now and I'll hand over back to Gavin for the first speaker. Gavin.
Thanks, Kevin. Hazel, I might ask you to share your screen, please.
Okay, so my name is Hazel Costigan and I am a postdoctoral researcher here in Teagasc Moorpark, and I work under Dr. Lauren Chalou. So I suppose our area that we were looking at is methane emissions and I suppose how to mitigate those methane emissions. So methane is a byproduct of feed digestion in ruminants, and it currently accounts for almost 2/3 of our agricultural greenhouse gas emissions here in Ireland. And we've been tasked with reducing these emissions by 25% by the year 2030 relative to 2018 levels. And I suppose this formed the basis then for Work Package 1. So I suppose Work Package 1 was tasked with then evaluating different methane inhibitors and feed additives. Also looking at the methane yield, their effect on milk quality, milk yield, and milk fatty acid profiles. And I suppose after all that then was I suppose deploying one of those solutions on the farm down in Chinook. So just a timeline then of the trials that we that took place here in Moorpark. So in the dry period of December 2021 to January 2022, we looked at the effect of press cake on late lactation and performance during the dry period. Then in June of 2022, we looked at Bovaer in grazing dairy cows. Then in October 2022 and March 2023, we looked at the calcium peroxide-based feed additive, and that just was 2 different dose rates there. And finally, I suppose we're hoping to submit papers on all those trials there before the project ends in December. So just a brief overview then on the press cake trial. As I said, that took place in December 2021, January 2022. So we had 42 different cows. The control group had 100% grass silage, and the treatment group had 60% press cake and 40% grass silage. And we looked at their methane, milk, I suppose in late lactation, and their body weight and body condition score throughout the project, and their group average dry matter intake. So we found that methane was slightly higher in the press cake cows, but they also produced more milk, fat and protein corrected milk in late lactation. So overall then their methane per kilo of fat and protein corrected milk was lower in late lactation. There was no significant effect on body weight. And I suppose all of these differences occurred because intake was higher. So press cake, I suppose, was a viable way to increase milk production in late lactation. So then we looked at the Trinop or Bovaer in grazing cows. So that was a 10-week study in June 2022. And I suppose here are some pictures, I suppose, from the trial. So this trial, I suppose, really highlighted the difficulties in terms of actually supplementing the cows with additives. So Bovaer or Trinop can't be pelleted, and it's sensitive to the heat and pressure in the pelleting process. So we had to weigh out 6.8 grams of the additive and mix it with 500 grams of coarse ration. Once they had been mixed, this had to be stored in a fridge and before fed out to the cows. And because I suppose it couldn't be pelleted, it had to go in a coarse ration. We couldn't feed that to the cows in the milking parlour. So it had to be fed, as you can see in the picture on the right-hand corner, at the top right-hand corner, had to be fed to the cows in buckets on exit from the milking parlour. So as you can see in the graph then, there was a 30% reduction in methane for 2.5 hours after we fed the additive, which was absolutely fantastic. That, I suppose, showed, it did exactly what it said in the tin, and it showed that we could achieve, I suppose, similar results to what they're getting in international research. But I suppose when you look at that over the course of the full day, that amounted to about 5 to 6% reduction in daily methane. So what this really showed us was that those good reductions are possible using Trinop, but we need to extend the efficacy of the product. So either by encapsulation or, I suppose, offering the additive at an additional time point in out of parlour feeders. So then we looked at the low dose rate of the calcium peroxide feed additive over a 7-week period. We used a similar feeding rate to they had used up in Grange on a trial in beef steers. So it was approximately 160 grams of calcium peroxide per cow per day. And this was also fed in, I suppose the good thing about this additive is it actually can be pelleted without detriment to the additive efficacy. But we were in the process of switching over to the new rotary parlour here in Moore Park. So we did feed it in the buckets on exit from the parlour. And methane was slightly lower using this additive, well, using the low dose rate of the additive. But what we did see is when we dug deeper into the results is that it was more effective in parity 1 and parity 2 animals. And I suppose this is because the, 2.2 kilos of concentrate made up a greater proportion of their overall dry matter intake. So that led us on to, I suppose, think about increasing the dose rate in future trials. So because I suppose there was no significant effect of the additive on methane, we didn't analyse the intakes or anything like that, but there didn't seem to be any effect on dry matter intake or milk production in that trial. So to that end, then we decided to do a trial using a higher dose rate. So we effectively doubled the dose rate. So we fed the cows 383 grams of calcium peroxide per cow per day, and that was in across 3 kilos of concentrate pellets. So they had 1.5 kilos in the morning and 1.5 kilos in the evening. And over a 6-week period, that was this April and May just gone by. So unfortunately, there were high refusals. I suppose the additive was just a bit too concentrated in the nut. So 24% of cows had some sort of refusal, and 15.2% of those refusals were over 500 grams. So we did intend on feeding this additive in the parlour, but because there was high refusal rates, we decided, I suppose, to keep feeding it in the buckets. So I suppose it appeared it was very much hunger is the best sauce kind of a thing. So we had to be really on top of the grassland management for this trial. So as you can see, there was a reduction in methane despite the refusal. So that was around 15% reduction in methane. I suppose this is only preliminary data. But as you can see here from this graph, there was a huge variation in additive efficacy. So it worked really well the first, say, 2 weeks. Then the, I suppose, reduction dropped down to about 4%. And this was on the way back up to about 10% when the trial finished in week 6. So there was huge variation there. So similarly with hydrogen, so there was an 18% reduction in hydrogen, but when you looked at that over the course of the trial, this varied from 23.5% to plus 22%. So there was huge variation there. And we think that this has got to do with the diet of the cow, I suppose, because they didn't see these variations in the study in Grange in which the cows were on silage diet. And I won't go through the whole table here, but the cows, because I suppose they did produce less milk and fat and protein, or milk solids, fat and protein corrected milk, and this was mainly driven by lower milk fat percentage. And I suppose ultimately then, once we got the dry matter intake results back, it appeared that they were consuming less feed, the calcium peroxide supplemented cows, so somewhere in the region of 8.5% less feed. So I suppose that could have been a factor of the week in which intake was measured. So intake was measured using the NLK technique in week 4. Whereas if we had done the intake run in week 1 or 2, when the additive efficacy was really, really good, it might have told a different story. And I suppose one question that has come up is, you know, if we had done the intake run in week 2, maybe the fact that it worked so well in week 2 was that their intakes were really, really low. So I just looked then at the trends in production between the treatment and control cows. And as you can see, they're relatively similar. So it's unlikely that there was a big effect on intake in week 2. So I suppose this just warrants, I suppose, further research. We have taken, and I suppose we've done it with all the trials, we take additional milk samples. So we take bulk tank samples from treatment and control cows every week. So they have some of these samples analysed, not all of them. So there was no effect on ethanol, rennet, or heat stability, or ionic calcium. They're only starting the last of the analysis. And we've also taken rumen samples, which are currently being analysed, and they'll help us to, I suppose, explain more about what is happening with the cows. So then I suppose just to touch back on the, I suppose, objectives of work package 1 at the outset. And as you can see, we have achieved most, if not all, of those objectives. And the challenges then and the next steps are, I suppose, based on the research that we've done, the existing additives such as 3-NOP and the calcium peroxide, we need to make feeding these additives more practical, especially in the case of Bovaer or 3-NOP. So using encapsulation or incorporating it into a concentrate. I suppose in terms of the calcium peroxide, we need to make it more palatable and then I suppose optimize dose rates. It would be good as well to, I suppose, identify more feed additives, and this will help with price competition in terms of the number of additives available for farmers to use. And we also need to develop more protocols for testing residues in the milk if we are to, I suppose, continue our reputation as a global exporter. Okay, so I suppose just to highlight then the results of the work package 1 have been presented at various different open days, conferences, and in, I suppose, some print media as well. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Hazel. Cian, I might ask you to share your screen.
Okay, you can see it?
Yep.
Perfect. So my name is Cian White, and I'm based in Trinity College Dublin, and I'm the ecologist on the project. And Work Package 2 is focused around biodiversity and natural capital. And the policy drivers for Work Package 2 were the European Green Deal, and specifically the EU biodiversity strategy. And this target of having 10% of agricultural area under high diversity landscape features was a key target for us. So can we reach 10% at this intensive dairy farm? And secondly, there was this corporate sustainability reporting directive, which is kind of the £800 gorilla from the corporate side. And a lot of companies are going to have to start reporting on their biodiversity ecosystems in their supply chain. And there's lots of different metrics around that we have kind of focused on developing measures for. So the work package aims coming out of those policy drivers are, can we demonstrate that an intensive dairy farm can reach 10% habitat? And then can we kind of scale this out and measure habitats, so not just farmer focusing on here, which is Shinnock, but across the supply chain using some kind of remote sensing system. And then going beyond just how much habitat there, can we also measure quality of habitat? Can we measure the quality of condition of farmland habitats too in a scalable way? And then finally package this up to not just looking at habitats themselves, but what are the benefits of these habitats? So can we measure the benefits and package it into some kind of framework that we call natural capital accounting? So looking at this kind of first target, which is to reach 10% habitat. Back in 2020, Shinnock had around 7.5% habitat on farm, composed of, mostly woodland and hedgerow. So we started about, bottom of the graph here, 7.52% habitat. And our strategy, and we did manage to reach 10% habitat this year, just over 10% habitat. And our strategy here was to focus on kind of the least productive areas of the farm and bits of the farm that are actually non-farmed. So particularly focus on like lawns or areas of gravel that we can convert into habitat, such as hedgerow or scrub. So that got us a little bit of habitat without compromising production at all. And then our next thing that we did was look at what parts of the farm are the least productive areas of the farm. So there was a large area of wet grassland that was kind of wet pasture that we converted into a nice wet grassland habitat. So it's got us a nice portion of habitat on the farm. Now that minimise loss in production because it could be grazed once, twice a year, but we've just changed the management so that would be fertilised or reseeded. And then we also looked at parts of the farm that were, smaller paddocks that were hadn't been reseeded for quite a long time, hadn't been intensely fertilised, so had a reasonable species composition in terms of grassland species in it. And we're going to not reseed those parts of the farm and not as intensively grazed, and I'm kind of going to create more kind of semi-natural grassland. So we've really increased a lot of the semi-natural grassland habitat on the farm to get up to this 10% habitat. And then the final thing that we did was look at converting a big conifer plantation over to semi-natural woodland. So we increased the semi-natural woodland habitat on the farm, and then that got us up to our 10% score. Just in terms of a visual representation of that, here's this lovely hedgerow that we planted. So this is a species rich, not just thorn, not just white thorn and black thorn, but it's about 12 different species here, all native. That was a lawn. Here is the wet grassland habitat. This was, grazed quite intensively. That's being grazed less, but still grazed a bit to, get some production out of it, but also increase the species richness by not having it grazed intensively. And then we wanted to try and scale this out. So not just do this at Chinook. So we've demonstrated we can reach 10% in Chinook, but how do we measure this on other farms in the supply chain or just across Ireland in general? So we wanted to create a kind of satellite-based habitat mapping system. So we take a very high resolution satellite image. This is an image from Airbus. Each pixel here is 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters. What we wanted to do was take an outline of a farm and then create a habitat map. So to do this, I set about creating a nice remote sensing data set. So I had over 10,000 labeled data points, and then mostly from the Carbery supply chain, images from the Carbery supply chain, but also then from 5 other sites around Ireland, and a total area of 205 kilometers squared of very high resolution imagery to train this model on. And this is kind of what the output of the model looks like. This is down in West Cork. This is a commonage area. We have bits of conifer plantation here in red, scrub here in orange, and then semi-natural grassland in blue, and then pastures in green. So we can see we're picking out this semi-natural grassland here from the pasture, which is important. This is an organic dairy farm just outside of Limerick. Again, this nice semi-natural grassland we've been picked out from the pasture that's around it. And the hedgerow here is in pink, and we can see nice thick hedgerows here compared to less thick hedgerows here in a more intensive area, again, which is a key aspect of the model. This is outside Lyons Farm in Dublin. So this is nice, this is arable in here in yellow, pasture in green again, and then hedgerow again between these two pasture types. Agricultural land use types, so which is again a key feature of the model. So this model is kind of working quite well in various different landscapes around Ireland. In terms of the accuracy assessment, on the bottom here we just have various data inputs into the model. I won't go through these. If you want to contact me about what the actual data inputs are, you can get my email and follow up. But overall, the accuracies, we're getting around 85% accuracy across 12 different land cover types, which is pretty good. It's comparable to what the National Land Cover Map that came out earlier this year, comparable actually to that National Land Cover Map. So what we've done then is take this model. So we're reasonably happy with the model. We've taken that, we've actually created an application out of it. So we can upload a farm boundary, and then this is sent to a backend. There's a Python script that requests satellite imagery for that specific area at a specific time. This is then processed into a farm habitat map. And then there's kind of a recommendation system where if the farm is not at 10% habitat, so we recommend this is how much pasture or how much new habitat you need to get to that 10% score. So now we have a scalable way to measure habitat across a supply chain or just for any farm we would like to in the country. So the next step for that is to kind of just test out the application and try and apply it to a whole supply chain. And if anybody's interested, do contact me. That's my email there, and we can maybe test out the application on any areas of interest that you might have. And then moving beyond just kind of what habitats are there and what is their quantity, we also wanted to create a kind of a condition map. So go from extent or quantity to also condition. So to do this, I created a script, an OR script called Conditioner that uses some geospatial packages and connects to other software through command line interface. And essentially that just means it's all open source. But what it does is it scores each habitat on the farm between 1 and 10, 1 being poor for biodiversity, 10 being good for biodiversity. And each habitat is scored based on what type of habitat it is, the size, its shape, its connectivity, whether it's core or it's peripheral. So kind of these kind of structural features of the habitat So each then, you can create a kind of habitat or condition map like this, where each habitat here is given a score between 1 and 10. And you can then sum these scores up to give an overall farm score in terms of the condition of habitat in this farm. And this is condition for biodiversity. So how useful is this habitat for biodiversity? And then lastly, what we want to do is not just look at condition or how much habitat is there and the condition of it, but what is the benefit of these habitats, both to the farmer and to wider society. So we looked at carbon sequestration, carbon storage, and water remediation. So, and this is kind of framed in natural capital accounting. So natural capital accounting is just a framework to capture and present the environmental benefits of habitats. And we're trying to apply this at the farm scale. So this is just some maps that I pulled out of a natural capital account. And this is CO2 flux in 2 years, 2021, 2022. And this data is coming from Carbon Space. And what I just want to point out here is that there's a lot of variation in terms of how much carbon is kind of being moving through each pasture, each habitat on the farm. So there's a lot of variation within a year, and then there's also variation between a year. So it's actually quite important to measure these things, not just use literature values, but try and actually measure these things empirically. This is through some remote sensing. But yeah, there's a lot of variation there. So I would say literature values are not really appropriate to use for maybe natural capital accounting. There's too much variation just within a farm and then between years. And this is tons of carbon per hectare. So this is the tons of carbon in the soil per hectare. This is data from a farmer who came and sampled each field in the farm. And again, it's a similar story here, that across the farm, there's a lot of variation in terms of tons of carbon in the soil. In the various different fields, there's, some fields have twice as much carbon stored in the soil compared to other fields. So again, that empirical measurement is key if you want to be able to measure these environmental kind of benefits or ecosystem services in farms. Kind of empirical measurement is very important. And then the final one I want to present here is just kind of nitrogen attenuation. So when you apply fertilizer to a field, some of that is going to be leached out into the ground or surface water, but the soil type and the vegetation around that field also can mitigate some of that leaching. So this is data coming from the EPA, from the pollution impact potential maps, and this is just showing, again, there's variation across the farm in terms of how much soil type and the vegetation mitigates that nitrogen leaching to the ground surface. So some areas have very high mitigation, some areas have quite low mitigation. So again, this is just a useful way to present that environmental information. So the work package aims, again, we did manage to get the farm to 10% habitat. We have built a scalable way to measure habitat in farms, and we have some kind of way to measure condition too. And then we've been looking at how to package this into kind of an account or a natural capital account to kind of illustrate and show farmers these wider environmental benefits. So if anybody wants to follow up with me, my email is ciwhite@tcd.ie, and I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cian. Alejandro, I'm going to ask you to share a screen for Work Package 3, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Alejandro Vergara, and I have been working in the Work Package 3 of Farm CRC, the Climate Neutral App, and overall the life cycle assessment piece of it. This work package is being led by University College Dublin through Dr. Fionnuala Murphy, and it's myself and Everton Vogel working on it. To begin with, and to understand what we are doing and what this work package is about life cycle assessment. This is a methodology for quantifying the environmental impact of any good or services. We have been developing a life cycle assessment model inside Farm CRC for determining what is the carbon footprint and overall environmental impacts of Shinac Farm from the production of the externalities until the milk leaves the farm gate. And we have been following international standards for it and feeding it with high quality data to get a precise and robust result of where is the farm standing. We have been also determining the potential emissions reductions through different practices that have been implemented in the farm or that could be implemented into the future, and also determining what has been the impact of those, dynamically developing assessments so that we can determine for good or for bad, how is it affecting the environmental impacts of the farm. And also we have been working on building a scalable infrastructure so that we can build the monitoring that we are doing and bring it to the wider dairy industry. So what has been happening in Shinac Farm, I won't go through this in detail as Gavin is going to go through it, but as you can see from the table, there has been a bunch of changes between 2018 and 2023. the fertilizer usage has significantly been dropped from 247 kgs of nitrogen per hectare to 114. Most of it is now satisfied by protected urea, reducing the ammonia emissions from the farm. Less feed is used. This is difficult because it depends a lot on the weather conditions of the year, but overall it has been reduced. A native diet is now being fed that is low in carbon footprint, as it not contains conventional ingredients like soybean meal from Latin America that has a high carbon footprint due to its deforestation. The percentage of grass-fed has been increased. Slurry has been chemically amended for reducing the ammonia emissions and the methane emissions from the manure management tank, and also antimethanogenic feed additives have been provided during housing. And it is important to note that all of these practices and products that have been incorporated, again to emphasize, is in a conventional dairy farm. This is the result of the great work that the farm manager has done, Kevin Ahern, and at the end, this is not reflecting in a decrease on the yields or in decrease of the productivity. As you can see, the second to last row and the last row, there has in fact been an increase in milk production, not only in quantity, but also in quality, reaching 452 kgs of solids per cow per year. How has this been affecting the farm? In 2018, the carbon footprint of the farm was 0.86 kgs of CO2 per kg of fat and protein corrected milk. The average of the country through the Sustainable Dairy Assurance Scheme of Bordvia was 0.96 during that year. There has been a 23% reduction on the carbon footprint of the farm as of 2022, reaching a value of 0.66, significantly lower than the Irish average. And for 2023, of course, it has not come to an end, but we believe it is going to be 0.65. There's not going to be much milk production or any fertilizer usage or anything during December, so it should be around that value of 0.65. It is important to note that this is not taking into consideration soil carbon sequestration. It is definitely a sensitive topic to include this into the methodology and to include this into the mix, because as Kian was mentioning, there's a lot of variations. You need precise data, robust data, and overall a good monitoring, reporting, and verification protocol in order to start making this claim. But for understanding how it would impact, this is a graph that would show what would happen if we integrate the carbon sequestration piece at a low carbon sequestration rate of 0.3 tons of carbon per hectare per year, and a high sequestration rate of 1.1 tons of carbon per hectare per year. As you can see, 2023 at a low carbon sequestration rate would be 0.58 kgs of CO2 per kg of fat and protein corrected milk, and with a high sequestration rate, it would be 0.39. And this is a reflection of what would happen in all of the farms of Ireland. Carbon sequestration is definitely going to reduce the carbon footprint of the farm, but it's not a silver bullet that is going to take it to zero or to negative. There's always around 25% mitigation that would take place. There's also important to make a differentiation between life cycle assessment and the numbers that I have been showing to you with the National Inventory Report. The objective of Ireland of reducing by 25% the emissions reductions by 2030 is related to a National Inventory Report that does not take into consideration the production of feed and fertilizer. It does not take into consideration because that is how countries report their emissions. And to note, the large majority of the mitigation of Shinac Farm has been taking place through the production of the feed and the fertilizer. The mitigation that has been taking place over this hotspot has been 51% from 2018 to 2022, but also the impacts associated with the National Inventory Report have been decreasing as well. In fact, they have decreased by 11%. It's not only about carbon, what we have been doing in Farm CRC, but it's also about the other impacts like ammonia, nitrates, biodiversity, and an overall a more holistic approach. And I think that a good measure of determining the impact beyond carbon is the mitigation of the ammonia emissions. As you can see from the graph, there has been a significant reduction on ammonia emissions, 40% mitigation between 2018 and 2022 in kgs of ammonia per hectare. The vast majority of it are associated with the fertilizer through the reduction of the inputs, but also the incorporation of protected urea. Manure land spreading emissions have been reduced as well. Low emissions slurry spreader is used in the farm, but also the timing of the application has changed. If you spread during the spring, the emissions are less as if you spread during the summer, for example. Manure storage emissions have been reduced through slurry chemical amendment and also a bit of a reduction in the manure that has been left on pasture. Life cycle assessment models are as good as the data that you get in. So we are constantly working in improving the data accuracy that we can get for developing a decision-making tool that is accurate and that can support the current practices, but also the future practices of Shinak. For that, various sensors have been incorporated among the farm, like weather stations, soil sensors, manure tank sensors, and silo sensors. For example, for the silo sensors, this helps us to avoid making a prediction of how much feed a cow eats per month or per season. Now we get granular data in terms of how many kgs of dry matter are fed to any type of cow per day, which helps to improve the models and overall improve the mitigation strategies going on. But these models and overall these decision-making tools that we have been developing for Shinak Farm are not specific to Shinak Farm. During the project, we have been working developing an infrastructure that is going to allow to bring these models and this overall platform to the vast dairy industry, not only in Ireland, but in different countries as well. So throughout a software development partner that is version 1 from Microsoft Azure, and the certifications that the model have been achieved, and also working with data providers like Boardvia and ICBF to make sure that we are integrating it to the work that is already being done by these organisms. We have developed a platform that allows corporates, through, for example, dairy cooperatives, to monitor their environmental impacts, like greenhouse gases or the biodiversity piece that Kian was mentioning, or ammonia, and also determining what are the most techno-economical strategies that could allow these cooperatives to achieve their climate goals. And these goals are completely related to the public piece that Kian was mentioning through the Corporate Sustainability Report Directive, and also from pressures that are coming from the private sector to get offered products that have a lower carbon footprint. So we have been working on this platform as well. Some key takeaway messages: the carbon footprint of Shinak has dropped from 0.86 to 0.66 kgs of CO2 per kg of fat and protein corrected milk. According to a national inventory report, there has been an 11% increase in the footprint during that same period. The ammonia emissions have decreased by 40% in the farm due to various practices that have not impacted yields. Despite many challenges, again, to emphasize this is a commercial dairy farm, and the farm manager has done absolutely amazing work incorporating these strategies while not compromising their yields. Sensors have been incorporated. We want to keep getting primary data for improving the accuracy of the models, but overall for determining how good are the practices that we are implementing in the farm. And a software development tool is being built so that we can bring this monitoring and also decision-making tool to the wider industry. Further strategies are required. This is not net zero carbon yet. We'll work on keep including soil carbon sequestration, the new development of anti-methanogenic feed additives, and overall different practices for the ultimate goal of achieving Shinak net zero carbon goal. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alejandro. James, can I ask you to share?
Sure, Gavin. Okay, hi everyone. My name is James Gaffey. I'm a researcher at Munster Technological University and also Biorbic. So I was leading work package 4 for the grass biorefinery and renewable energy aspects. And just to mention some of the other contributors, Gavin Hunt is going to be talking about some of the work also later in the presentation, and also to mention Johan Sanders of Grassa, Fionnuala Murphy of UCD also who've been involved here. So Kevin mentioned about some of the innovative companies who've been involved in the work. Grassa, obviously a very innovative green biorefinery company from the Netherlands who we've had a good collaboration with. Also to mention Salignus, who've helped us with some of the analytical work. Makeway Nutrition, Barry Rowe, and Carhu Piggeries, who helped us with the pig trial work and looking at the pig diets. And Watt Footprint, who've helped us as well in the implementation of the renewable energy aspects. Okay, so I'm going to begin the presentation and talk about the grass biorefinery work we've been doing within the project. So what's a grass biorefinery? It's essentially a facility that can help us to look at processing grass into multiple products, potentially creating a feed for cattle, but also creating other high-value products, sustainable products that can enter the market and create diversification opportunities for grassland farmers. Mainly within this project, we've been looking at the press cake, as Hazel looked at in work package 1 and indicated that this is a viable alternative to silage for treating, for including in dairy cow diets. But we can press a lot of the material out in the form of green juice, and then establish further products from this, including a dry leaf protein concentrate, which we've been looking at for pigs, and then a grass whey or a brown juice, which can be used for bioenergy and other high-value products. So I'm going to focus mainly on this aspect, which has been the testing of the different protein product for the pig feed sector. So just to mention, the products that we produced were produced in August and September 2021. We produced a press cake, which was supplied towards Hazel's trials in dairy cows. And then we looked at the leaf protein concentrate as a co-product, which was going to be tested in pig diets as an alternative to soybean meal. You can see in terms of composition, the main thing to note is the protein concentration of our protein concentrate, and this is how it looks in powdered form, was around 43%. We did some work previously on this where it was at 34%. So it's been significantly increased and is an improved form of protein. Just for comparative purposes, you can see it's around 43%, and this compares with the crude protein in soybean meal, which is around 44 to 48%. It's quite comparable in terms of limiting amino acids. It's slightly lower in lysine and cysteine, but comparable across the others. So we had a target then of a 50% soybean meal displacement in pig diets. Obviously, soybean being transported across the world brings a big footprint and is associated with a lot of environmental problems, particularly coming from South America. So if we could displace this with a locally produced protein, it would offer a lot of benefits for pig farmers, but also potentially for dairy farmers in terms of new income streams, but also potentially having the overall impact of reducing the emissions on dairy farms as well. So in terms of the two diets, the main difference between the treatment diet, which was the grass protein-based diet, and the control diet, which was the soybean diet, was that we had a reduction of hypersoy in the treatment diet, and we had this inclusion of grass protein within the treatment diet as an alternative, and it was a 50% displacement rate. We'd previously looked at a trial which was around 30% and had pretty good results. We wanted to up this on the basis of having a higher grade of protein that we had produced. Also, just to mention, we included some synthetic lysine and methionine within the treatment diet. This is mainly to keep the protein levels balanced between the diets, and we had some extra limestone flour included within the control diet because the calcium was a little bit higher in the treatment diet. So we ran the trial with 9-week-old weaners over a 30-day period. We found that there was a little bit of fluctuation in terms of daily feed intake for the first couple of weeks, but by the time we were getting to the end of the trial, we were finding that the pigs who were on the treatment diet had acclimatized very well and were actually consuming more of the treatment diet compared with the control batch. Overall, the feed conversion efficiency was quite similar across both diets. And by the end of the trial, we actually had an increase in average daily gain in the case of the pigs on the treatment diet compared with the control diet. So this is the second trial with which we've tested this alternative feed. And in both cases, we found an increase in the average daily gain. So speaking with the pig farmers that we've been working with, the view is that if this product was available and cost competitive with soybean meal, this is something they would really like to use within the diet as opposed to importing soy. You can also see there's a difference in coloration between the feeds. The grass protein is quite dark green in color compared with the yellow control diet, and also there's a difference in color in the feces as well, although the consistency was similar to the feces coming from the control batch, and there were no other health impacts that were noticed within the trial. Just one other thing that we looked at was also the production of the slurry that's coming from the two different batches. The pig producer that we were working with, so Cathal O'Donovan at Carbery Piggeries, supplies a lot of his slurry produced on farm to a local community digester in Timoleague, an anaerobic digester. So we wanted to look at the overall impact on the potential biomethane difference coming from the two different diets, and we found that overall the treatment slurry had a higher level of biogas potential, and in particular biomethane potential, which was between 22 to 35% higher in the case of the treatment diet slurry compared with the control diet slurry. So there may be some implications, some benefits then in terms of the downstream use of this within the anaerobic digester. And this is interesting from the point of view of both the pig diet and the energy use within the pig sector being key target areas in terms of improving the sustainability of the pig sector. So I think a lot of opportunities that are going forward for the pig sector, but also for the dairy sector in terms of being able to diversify products that are produced on farm, which can increase the value of grass in Ireland, but also potentially reduce the environmental footprint of dairy farms as well. And just to finish on a really nice announcement we've got from some of the work we've been doing. UCD, MTU and Carbery have recently received 3 million in funding from the Department of Agriculture to develop an integrated anaerobic digestion and green biorefining demonstration facility, which will help us to continue our work in the area and build on the work that we've done to date. So I'm going to pass over to Gavin, who's going to talk through some of the other aspects of Work Package 4.
Thanks, James. I might ask you just to flick on to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Yeah, so when we're looking at energy use, it's not a massive part of our carbon footprint, especially when we're comparing it to methane and nitrous oxide, but it's still an area that we really need to focus on and reduce as much as possible. So our objectives were quite simple. We wanted to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels, reduce the cost of energy on farm, and then subsequently reduce our carbon footprint. So our first step was to actually look at energy usage on the farm and where could we actually reduce energy before looking at renewables, so get a better bang for our buck. So some of the areas you can see there from the main areas of the energy use in a dairy farm, predominantly coming from milk cooling, water, heating, milking, others, lighting, etc. So we actually did this in Shannock as well, and what we saw is that we've actually identified the compressors as a high energy usage, and that was an area that we focused on as well. So looked at energy efficient equipment. The farm, in fairness, are very, very progressive and had already installed variable speed drives in the vacuum and milk pump. So we looked at new energy efficient compressors, new heat recovery on those compressors, looked at energy monitoring, looked at solar PV immersion. So reduce energy consumption before looking at renewables. Then we installed a 15 kilowatt hour solar PV system coupled with battery storage, and then any excess then was supplied back into the mini generation scheme. The farm also has a wind turbine, which was installed in 2011. Historically was producing about 30% of the energy usage on the farm, and the remainder go back into the grid. That was out of action for 2022, and it was actually back up and running from the end of October, start of November. So you see a small bit in the next graph as well. So big reduction, big focus on reducing energy and then looking at renewables. So I might ask you just go on to the next slide, James. So this gives you a feel for our energy system. We installed this back in July 2022. So this is over 2023. Obviously, during the summer months, there's a lot more produced. But if you look at the top right, we produced to the end of November 13.55 megawatt hours in 2023 to the end of November, and we consumed 88% of that. So very, very little is actually going back to the grid. So you can see actually from the green, that's actually what the energy to the battery, that's the benefit of the battery, was able to capture that electricity. A lot more actually exported back to the grid, as you can see in November, that dark grey, that was because the wind turbine came back on stream and started reducing our energy consumption. So you just want to go on to the next slide, James. So these are some of the results from the past few years. So we looked at 2019 as the base year, looked at the energy monitoring. We had consumed about 38,000 kilowatt hours from the grid. And also when you factor in kerosene, we were actually able to get rid of the kerosene boiler on the farm to produce hot water. So when you look at the equivalent, that was about just over 20,000 kilowatt hours. So in total, energy usage 2019, 58,675. And then when we look at our data from 2023, that's reduced to 23,214, which is nearly a 60% saving in overall energy usage. So that's a really, really good story. I suppose what we need to do now, when that wind turbine is back on stream, we're actually potentially able to reduce that even further. The big challenge for us, I suppose, the energy demand is we have a big peak in the morning for milking and a big peak in the evening. So how can we match that energy demand what we're producing? But we're also supplying energy back into the grid. So big savings, obviously from an energy point of view, CO2, about 13.66 tons of CO2 compared to 2019, and a financial saving as well of nearly €5,800 per annum. So big savings there, and the return on investment for these technologies will vary, roughly about 5 years if we were to couple all these together, but it's going to be based on electricity prices and grants available. So something like solar, with current electricity prices and grants up to 60%, we can see return on investment as little as 3 or 4 years, and you're getting basically nearly free electricity after that. Just the next slide, James. So this is the last slide. Look at the native concentrate. So Alejandro would have touched on this. So those are, we're aiming to feed, and we have fed 100% native ingredients in our concentrate here in Shannock. So this has significantly less carbon associated with Irish cereals versus the imported ingredients. Roughly, depending on the formulation, somewhere between 40, 50, even up as high as 60% lower carbon footprint versus the imported. So if we're comparing that to standard dairy 16, but again, it's going to depend on the actual constituents of those blends. Normally, a higher protein percentage has higher emissions. That's normally due to the high inclusion rate of soya and the emissions associated with land use change there. We know that we're a net importer of animal feed here, so we can't supply 100% Irish native cow or diets to every cow in the country. So I suppose what we're looking at then is European byproducts as the next best option as low carbon. So there's products there such as beet pulp, rapeseed that have a lower carbon footprint when we're looking at the likes of soya coming from South America. So on an average year, and this will depend on what we're feeding. So if we're looking at feeding 500-600 kilos of concentrate per cow per year in Shannock, that will have a reduction of about 3%. And when we look at our most recent year of 2023, that would be nearly as high as 5-6%. So it has a big impact on the carbon footprint. And again, what we're also trying to do is reduce the actual amount of concentrates coming into the farm. So the less imports we've been through the farm gate, the lower the carbon footprint we're actually going to have. That's me, James. So I think we're
Thanks,
okay.
Kevin. Yep. If people want to get in touch, that's my email. But thanks very much. So I'll pass back to Kevin.
Thanks, James. I'm going to hand over to Teresa for Work Package 5.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, my name is Teresa Rubara from the Circular Bioeconomy Research Group, MTU. Sorry. So I'll be presenting on behalf of the Circular Bioeconomy Research Group and the IMAR at MTU. The work package leader is James Gaffey. Basically, this is the outline which I'm going to follow, and I'll talk about the project objectives and project achievements, stakeholder engagements, as well as policy recommendations. So the objectives of Work Package 5 was to develop a social innovation blueprint, SIB document. I'll call this one the SIB document from now, and develop a web platform to support farmers. This is digitalizing the SIB document and rolling out and testing the platform. So this is the summary of the project achievements, trying to highlight different methods and how we came up with the project document, this SIB blueprint document and the business case. Basically, this is a document which contains all the mitigation strategies, all the biodiversity and natural capital accounting information, business case, market policy recommendations, which are being implemented at Farm 0C. And basically the planning processes included some of the issues to do with classification of strategies. We also had to create the content based on literature review and all the work that is being done at Farm 0C. And the digitalization phase involved like digitalizing the document, like putting it on the website. So basically this is the most information you would find in the document. It consists of the overview, the climate change mitigation strategies consisting of these headings, the overview, economic and environmental benefits, research, regulation and suppliers, and all this information on biodiversity, and a business case, which is like a case study of how we can turn a conventional farm into a sustainable dairy farm, and the policy recommendations. These are basically the main strategies you'd find on the SIB, both in the report and also on the web platform. And this is the website for the platform. So for the business case, what we did, we modeled a typical average dairy farm with 93 cows and 52 hectares based on the National Farm Survey report from Tegas. And the farm had a net income of over 86,000 euros. So what we did is we came up with the assumptions of a first scenario, which is like low input, low mitigation strategies applied. For example, you just change from 220 kilograms of nitrogen to 185 kilograms of nitrogen fertilizer per hectare. But for scenario 2, it was the most high scale but practical way to reduce the fertilizer. And at the end of the day, we came up with 2 scenarios and modeled them for economic and environmental assessment. From the economic and environmental perspective, we used the LCA model as developed by Alejandro and adopted it for the conventional farm. So at the end of the day, in scenario 1, we would find that there was a reduction in emissions of 12% and a 36% reduction in emissions for scenario 2, because this is a high scale. But for the economics, we would find that we still have net savings, like net profit, instead of a loss out of after implementing the mitigation strategies. So this is a good thing, because even at low implementation levels, we still get a profit of over 6,000. This is mainly to fertilizer savings and the good slurry management practices. Okay. So this is basically the snapshot of the platform. I'll come back to this one as I show you the website. And in stakeholder engagements, we were engaging throughout with broader stakeholders. For example, we had an online survey with farmers to give us their initial remarks on what to consider in the SIB platforms. We also had workshops, open day, and presentations, academic presentations. Then we also held a workshop on an introductory workshop on the potential of carbon farming for the farmers. And if successful, the Farm 0C is also exploring this carbon farming, which will be helpful to diversify income if successful. This is important so that implementation of sustainable practices could be rewarded through carbon credits. And this is the conclusion and policy recommendations. Climate change mitigation provides opportunity for production efficiencies, as can be seen from the environmental economic impact assessment. Then there should be clear and concise information to the farmers, and there is need to develop policies that incentivize and reward farmers. I'll stop here and just quickly go through with you through the website, just to show you the platform. So when you log into that farm0cproject.ie, it's an open website. You don't need a password. It's just free for all. So these are the basic headings on what information will you need. And this will help farmers, like when they want to implement certain strategies, why should they implement it and how to implement it. So for the mitigation strategies, for example, we have these: grassland management, fertilizer, slurry management, native feeds, all these ones. So when you click, for example, on the grassland management, these are the 4 main grassland management activities. Of course, there are many of them, but we are focusing on the ones which are implemented at Farm0C. For example, you go to multi-species swords. So this is the overview, like, why are we doing this? And from there, you would find farmer videos on trying to explain why we are doing that, and the corresponding text on, like, if you are not really watching the video, you can still just browse through and see. And establishment of multi-species swords, for example, economic and environmental benefits. The research that we are carrying out, this is practically trying to summarize all the information about the research which is being carried out at the Farm0C project, so that we show the scientific evidence to support the claims made earlier on. Then the regulations, like what are the policies and supporting framework for example, in the multi-species swords, what are the supporting regulations? Then the suppliers, if and when they are available, they are provided. We also have, like, the tools. For example, this habitat mapping tool, it connects to KINS tool, which he has already informed you. Like, when you click here, you'll realize that it will connect to that. Yeah. So I suppose these are the main headings on the website, and you are free to browse through the website using that website address. I think that's all for now. Thanks. And in any case, if you need more information, you can always contact myself, or, sorry for that, or James Caffey at MTU. Those are our email addresses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing, please. Thank you very much. So this is our last presentation. Just a reminder to everybody listening, if you do have any questions, please put those into the questions and answers box, and we'll get to answer those in the next 10 minutes. So myself and John McNamara are going to give a quick update on what's actually happening here on Schnock Farm and a bit of insight into the management of the farm. So looking at animal emissions, so Hayes will have touched on this. Obviously, enteric fermentation is a big part of our carbon footprint, but we're also looking at methane from stored slurry. So an average farm, depending on housing dates, it could be 7-8% of the farm's carbon footprint. Methane coming from the anaerobic conditions under the cows with the manure. So we've been working with Glassport Bio, a startup out of NUIG, who've actually scaled it up from lab scale and actually up to scaled it. Schnock was the first commercial farm scaled using this slurry chemical amendment to reduce methane from stored slurry. So you can see here from the graph, gives an idea of the results. So the green line is actually the treatment, red line is the control, and you can see roughly about between a 75 and 80% reduction in methane from stored slurry. So the company in question can actually think they can increase this by dosing more frequently. Ammonia is also an area that we've seen some potential reductions here as well, but the big focus really is on the methane aspect. So we were able to scale this up in Shannock, and we've installed an automated dosing system. So it looks very, very simple. It was retrofitted into the main cow tank, IBCs with a bund outside, and then those dosing points at numerous points in the slats. So it fits in with the existing infrastructure. We've been using this for the last, manually dosing for the last 2 to 3 years, and this is the first year we're actually using this automated dosing system. So soil and grassing is crucial as well. So John is going to touch on fertilizer as well, and Alejandro has touched on this as well. We would have been using around 248, 247 kilos of chemical nitrogen per hectare, and this has been reduced down to 114 kilos of chemical nitrogen in 2023. So really, really fantastic results. The target at the beginning of the project was to get to 150. So a lot of credit here has to go to Kevin Ahern and the farm management staff. How has this been achieved? About 70% of the grazing platform is actually sown under multi-species swards. 60% of the farm has sufficient clover, so fixing atmospheric nitrogen. It's like having a fertilizer factory on your own farm. So that's through white clover on the grazing sward, and then red clover in the silage swards. And in future plans, we want to look at the health and resilience of the farm through soil health, of getting your pH, P's and K's right. Is there other areas such as biostimulants and biofertilizers moving forward? Can we potentially push that lower and maybe even increase productivity as well? This gives you an idea of the farm. So a lot of progress made to get the farm to sufficient clover. You can see the darker colours, sufficient clover, and the kind of lighter, whiter colours, light blue, need a bit more work to get them there. So 10% of the farm reseeded every year, and then aiming to do some over-sowing as well. Protected urea, our aim is to use, where possible, nearly 100%. So like most farms dipped their toes in the water in 2019, you would use a couple of pallets, and in 2022, and similar figures for 2023, 97, 96% protected urea. So what we're spreading, reduce as much as possible, but what we're spreading has to be protected urea. So that small amount that is actually non-protected urea, that's just out of practicality around reseeding using the likes of a 10-10-20, which is an NPK can-based compound. Alejandro would have touched on carbon sequestration and the importance as well. So what is it? Removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in soils and woody biomass. So we know this is happening in Shannock. It's going to be a way we can displace our emissions. We just need to measure, report and verify this. So the picture on the right is in an Eliocovarians tower installed in collaboration with Chagas, with NASCO, a Chagas program. So this will actually give us some data and help us calculate how much carbon is stored in a particular part of the farm. There's actually about 30 odd of these towers located around the country, different soil types, different management practices to get a picture of what's happening. But we can use this to see what's happening as a certain part of the farm. And we've also taken rigorous soil samples to a depth of 30 and 60 centimeters. So standard samples are normally 10 centimeters. We're going to 30 and 60 to look at the tons of organic carbon. So this is in collaboration with Farmway. So they're applying a rigorous scientifically verified sampling procedure, in situ measurement of bulk density as well, up to 60 centimeters, and it's going to be based on the most robust and internationally recognized standards. So this has been done for Shannock Farm, but this has also been done for the 10 monitor farmers that we're working with as part of the project. Water quality is a key aspect of the project as well. So our objective is to demonstrate good practice and then try to monitor these changes. So some of the measures taken in Shannock, we're using 100% low emission slurry spreading technology, moving fences to increase buffers, following a rigorous nutrient management plan, spreading slurry in correct conditions, using 100% protected urea where possible, ensuring adequate slurry storage, considering weather forecast and soil conditions. So those sensors installed in the farm will actually be able to give us a good idea of when we can actually go out with nutrients and then good farming management practices. So we've participated in the asset program where Carbery advisors have come out onto the farm. They've looked at the farm, suggested improvements, and those improvements have been taken on board by the farm staff here as well. We're trying to monitor water quality, so we don't yet have a full picture of this. We'll be coming on to 12 months of full monitoring in February. But we have ceramic cups, which you can see from the diagram, are measuring nitrate loss to water to about 1 meter. So across 3 sward types, multi-species, perennial ryegrass and clover, perennial ryegrass only. So collecting that depending on rainfall, weekly, fortnightly, depending on the levels. So these actually just fit into the field cemetery, or you would know that they're there. It's basically putting over a manhole cover and you don't actually see this, and practices remain as normal. This is my last slide before handing over to John McNamara. So engagement in the project has been fantastic, and it's been a really, really key focus for us. So just to give you a flavour, In 2022, there was 27 groups came through the farm gate. In 2023, this was actually increased to 44 groups, and we've had over 1,600 people came through the farm gate. The highlight really was the Farm Zero C Open Day back in 2022, where there was over 600 people came through the farm gate. So it's an audience, wide range. Obviously, farmers are a key stakeholder. We're trying to get as many farmers through the farm gate as possible. Politicians, policymakers, industries, customers of Irish dairy. We've had local primary schools, local secondary schools, universities, etc. So that's a key part of the project, but also external events. So some of the key highlights, the project is highlighted on the signpost series. We've spoken at that twice. Team members have been speaking at conferences such as the DAFM, ICOS, SFI. We've spoken at the National Ploughing Championships, Moore Park Open Days, AIB sustainability events, and that's just to list a few. The team have been engaging with a wide group of stakeholders for the last 2.5 years. So I'm going to hand over to John McNamara, and just a last minute reminder, if you have any questions and answers, just put your questions into the box, please. John, I might hand over to you. And I might try to keep it to about 4 or 5 minutes, if that's okay, John, just to give time for discussion.
No bother. Can you see? No.
Yeah, all good. If you go into presentation mode now.
Perfect. You're good?
It's not gone into presentation mode, we can see it, so I'd say if you can't get into it, we can work away.
What have you in?
We can see the slides, John, so if you can work down through them.
Okay. I won't put the video on in the background because I've a cold at the moment and I don't want to give it to anyone that's on the session at the moment, so it might be safer just work in the background. So I'm reporting on the Shannock farm side of things, which is Gus O'Brien is our financial controller. Kevin Ahern, who's been mentioned before, is the man doing the stuff on the ground, and I'm just reporting on it. So Patrick French and myself are involved from a Teagasc point of view. So you've got this, so I'll run through quick. 243 cows were milked on average in 2023. 102 hectares farm, that's including lease farm land, and some of that is the outside ground. And it was already mentioned, most of that at this stage is down to red clover and grass, and it's doing a super job with just soil water and slurry. And we need all the soil water and slurry we have to make sure we're supplying enough NP and K back into that. But the red clover is doing the main job of supplying nitrogen there. The stocking rate is just a little bit over the famous 220. This year, we're in band 2 as regards nitrates, which is that 92 kilograms of organic nitrogen a cow, the middle band, just to give a bit of background. Grass and fertilizer, this year, 12.15 tonnes grown, up a little bit from last year, up about 3/4 of a tonne from last year, which was a poor grown year here. 114 kilograms of bag nitrogen, I suppose I should be saying, 20 kilos of bag phosphorus, and 62 kilos of bag potassium. Making maximum use of slurry, as you've already seen, with all slurry going on in low emission slurry spreading. We have also, it's effectively owned by the 4 West Cork Co-ops, and Shannock Estates is the overall company. Are very conscious of the value of the nutrients in slurry, and as a consequence, over the last 2 years, there's been a lot more slurry storage built here to be able to use it when we want to use it, rather than just moving it out on the land when it's not going to do as much good. If you look at clover and multi-species, and apologies for maybe not a data up in this, Gavin has touched on it already. There's 60% of the farm with above 20% clover on it. So there's high clover swards that got no chemical nitrogen whatsoever this year, 2023, and have produced 12.44 tonne of grass. There's high clover, which only got 1 shot of nitrogen in spring. They're around the same 11. Then there's high clover, which got 2 applications, is around 11.76. And our normal 40% of the grounds are remaining. That's up at the 182, is at 12.55, matching the first thing. The bottom line is here, after building confidence in what clover can do, high clover swards can match high bag nitrogen swards and grass grown. We are happy with that. Multi-species are not adding anything as regards nitrogen to the ground, but they are offering biodiversity. They're offering deeper roots. Maybe we will get rewarded somewhere in the future for this, because maybe they're helping sequester more carbon down into the soil. They're doing absolutely no harm from a cow point of view. They're happy to graze them away. We're not so sure how long they're going to last with a tight grazing regime, but that's another day's work. Calving and breeding, just to come back to some of the sort of the KPIs from a commercial point of view, high EBI herd, driven by Kevin's use of high ABI bulls. So 257 at this stage, a phenomenal 90% 6-week calving rate in 2023. Calving is around, sorry, is the 21st of February is when our median calving date is. 362-day calving interval, really going back to, they're a fertile herd driven by crossbred in the background way back, and still trying to hold a certain amount of that, and then high EBI, high fertility, black and white bulls used in the meantime. Submission rate 98%, and 9.2, 23 cows on a calf at the end of the year, which is 9.2%. Just some financial performance, because we're very conscious, are any of these things that you've heard all along, and like Teresa looked on, could they have a negative financial impact on the farm? So we'll just compare 2022 versus 2023, 247 milk last year, 243 milk this year. Productivity per cow was up from 4793 last year to 5216 this year. And most importantly, milk solids per cow was gone from 412 to 452. So that's going to have a big impact overall in diluting down our costs for the year. Meal is more or less the same, 927 versus 872. Poorer grass growing year. Last year, it went up a bit. Here's probably the harsh part of it. Milk price last year, including all bonuses, was 61.5. Milk price this year, okay, it's not going to move very much off of that. We still have the November milk to be paid. I've made an estimate at it. Will be 49 cents, 12 cents down on last year. But meal is down this year from 8.18 to 7.83. Fertilizer is down, as has been touched on a number of times. It's down both in amount and in price from 5.55 to 2.99. So total costs last year were effectively where our milk price is this year at 48.69. And last year we had a net cash flow of 19,000, or sorry, a net cash flow of 19 cents a litre, which when you multiply it up here on the herd of cows was 225,000 or over 900 euros a cow cash before depreciation. This year our costs will be down some bit because for nothing else they'll be diluted with higher output. So milk price, we'll have a margin this year, but it's going to be a tight margin. Gavin, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I might get you to stop sharing and we'll go to questions and answers. So there's a few after coming in, so we'll try to get through those as many of those as possible. We have a hard stop at 12:30, so I'm going to start with the first question. So there's a question coming in here, and it's kind of a common question that actually comes in, and I suppose a lot in the media about this as well. When we're looking at animal emissions, will there also be some research or discussion around the size of the dairy herd, or I suppose culling of the dairy herd? So Enda, I might direct that question towards yourself.
Yeah, I suppose when we started the project, Gavin, we didn't countenance any cull. I mean, I suppose for us, this is reality. And again, for context, I suppose this is a big farm by our standards. Like the average cow herd, certainly in Carbery, is about 90 cows. Seen from the webinar, there's 250 on the farm here. So it's a big farm by our standards, which makes this more challenging, makes the objective much more challenging. But again, that's reality. And this is a real life commercial dairy farm. So to the question, I suppose, Gavin, no, we didn't countenance a cull. Nitrates might dictate otherwise down the road. The farm is going to stay within 250 for the next couple of years. But that's not part of our plan to decarbonize the farm.
Thanks, Enda. One or two questions coming in on feed additives. Hazel, and we direct those to yourself. Have more part looked at biochar, and I suppose you might maybe comment on some of the other feed additives we looked at through Farm Zero C. We looked at the tree nut product and the rumen glass product through Glasport Bio. You might make a comment. Are you looking at biochar, or is there any other feed additives that are of interest coming down the stream?
No, so we did, I suppose, before we do any of the trials here in Moorpark, we kind of weigh up the pros and cons, and we have to ask ourselves, are those additives in line with the sustainability of our systems? Are they, easy to feed on farms and all that kind of thing? And we did look at biochar. We didn't obviously trial it, but there's the variation in results. There's big variation in results. A lot of the studies that have been done to date have been done in vitro. So in, I suppose, artificial rumen systems, and those results don't often translate very well across to in vivo, which is in live animals. So no, I suppose is the question. We haven't looked into it. It also depends, I suppose, on what substance is burned to actually create the biochar. And there's just very big variation in it. So I suppose we felt it wouldn't be worth doing a trial on it in Moore Park until we knew more about it. But I suppose, yeah, as Gavin said, most of the trials we've done have been on Bovaer or tree nop in both grazing cows. We've also done them during the dry period, and I suppose buffer feeding the Bovaer to the cows at night during the late lactation. And as well as that, we've done the rumen glass, which is the calcium peroxide based feed additive. We've done the 2 different dose rates of that. So that's, I suppose, all we have done to date. There has been work done, I suppose, internationally on a nitrate product from Cargill, but with that product, you need to feed 4 to 5 kilos of concentrate in order to get the required dose rate into the cows, and that's just not in line with the sustainability of our system. So yeah.
Thanks, Hazel. Cian, I might come to you next. I suppose there's a question coming in here about the natural habitat, 7.5%. Would this be a typical farm? Was it a good starting figure? And there was another one and you might add on to that piece as well. For in terms of what did you do to get to that biodiversity? Was it wildflowers, just leaving nature do its thing? So you might just make a comment on those 2, please.
So for an intensive dairy farm, 7, 8, 9%, that tends to be a typical figure. So there's a survey done by Chagas a few years ago where they surveyed beef, dairy and arable farms. I think dairy came in around 8-9% habitat. So this is kind of a typical farm, maybe a bit lower than a typical farm. And we also worked with another 10 farms in the Carbery supply chain, and there was a habitat percentage anywhere from about 5 to 25. So there's quite a range, but on the intensive side, 7.5 is a typical figure. And then there was a question around, are we planting flowering plants? So it depends on, we do both. We let nature kind of rewild itself in a way, just change the management and let nature do its thing. But if we're looking at a very intensive pasture and taking that out of production, and then we're going to help it along with, seeding it with some native wildflower mixes. And these are not just from your local garden centre, but these are particularly, sourced from, Irish genetic stock and planted to try and create what would have been an old traditional hay meadow, so that kind of species mixture. So quite intentional species composition planted there. And then in terms of how we manage the weeds under wires, I'm actually not sure how we do that. Maybe Gavin or John, you could comment on
that. Mechanical gain is the way, trying to reduce some of the sprays we're using.
Yeah.
I might come to John. So there's 1 or 2 questions here, John. I might just quick answers on them. I suppose the role of crossbreds going forward, and I might ask you to make a comment as well about the Ballyvaden beef project that the farmers involved in as part of that.
Yeah, so both. I see the question coming in, and everything you're asking is correct. Your crossbred is a more efficient animal and converting grass dry matter into milk product. Where's that going long term as regards the whole issue as regards calves? I suppose is up for debate across the country. A part of and to tip my hat at Inda here, part of future-proofing Shannock here is the Shannock owners got involved and leased the farm in Tipperary. They're 50-50 owners of this lease with Dawn Meats, with the objective of producing higher quality calves coming out of Shannock. So from a dairy farmer's point of view, the dairy farm had to be very careful that you were using normal gestation beef bulls, and that you were not using higher calving difficulty. After 2 years of doing that, we're happy you can pick those bulls. We can produce a higher, what they call CBV, carcass beef value, or commercial beef value, I beg your pardon, commercial beef value. So we are doing that, and we are able to produce those type of quality calves, even from cows, if you're into year EBI, even from cows with a -30 for beef merit. So it is possible, I think, to match the two, to get the efficiencies from your crossbred cow and still produce a beef calf off of that, that the beef man can make money out of. Obviously, a key part of that is linking it up then with sex semen, that you're minimising the amount of the lower value dairy calves, whether that be Jersey cross or Frisian cross that's coming from the dairy herd.
Thanks, John. question, Alejandro. I'm going to direct this one to you in terms of methane. So it treated as a one-way emission. So I suppose GWP star versus GWP 100. Just to get your thoughts on that, and how does it affect the potential emissions going forward?
It's a great question, and it's definitely a controversial topic. As a project, we need to follow what the country does, though. And the country at the moment is using global warming potential 100. That is not differentiating that much between the biogenic and the fossil-based methane. Nevertheless, it's a methodology that we are constantly monitoring to see what is going to happen at policy level. There has been a lot of developments over the last couple of weeks, and if it comes to it, we're going to model it. In the particular case of Chinook Farm, it's going to be worse because the herd size has been increased. It's going to be worse for Ireland if this gets incorporated because the herd size has increased as well. But if it comes to it, and if it is recognized at the national inventory report, we would incorporate it. But as mentioned, as a project, we have to follow what the country does.
Might have a benefit in the future, Alejandro, but not an excuse to kind of not focus on methane going forward. We really have to reduce that as much as possible. It's still going to be a key challenge.
Yeah, in despite of the methodology, we need to act on methane, and Ireland might lose its competitive advantage globally from an environmental standpoint if we are not working more on the grazing feed additives. So definitely we need to act, and the work that Chagas has been doing on this is already setting up a proper foundation on this. So definitely we need to act in despite of any methodology that is used.
Just one last question for Hazel here, and apologies everyone, we're going to have to move on because we've a hard stop at 12:30. I suppose finding something practical, Hazel, for a grazing system. I suppose in the trial for Trinop, you looked at feeding it in the buckets. Is there a way, I suppose, what's the ideal scenario for a farmer going forward? I want to feed something in the morning. What's the ideal scenario from your point of view?
Yeah, so I suppose based on what we've done in Moorpark so far, there are huge challenges in terms of feeding additives to grazing cows. That's why I suppose we had to use the buckets. But I suppose until we can figure that out, feeding the additives during the dry period using a diet feeder, I suppose is a solution. So we're hoping to feed Bovaer or Trinop on some of the signpost farms this winter. And I suppose if we could get a 22% reduction over a 6 or 8 week dry cow period, if you look at that then over the whole year, it's around 3.5% reduction in methane over the whole year. So I suppose until we can get we're working on it, we're doing a lot of work on it, but until we can crack the additives in grazing systems, feeding them during the dry period, I suppose, provides a solution, and just it helps us, I suppose, with meeting those targets until we crack the ones for grazing cows.
Thanks, Hazel. So something practical, feeding into the concentrate, bolus, those kind of technologies. I'm going to hand over to Enda Buckley just for the last word, but just before I do, just a reminder, apologies everyone, we didn't get to answer every question, but I would encourage you to reach out to one of the project team members if you have any follow-up. And this webinar has been recorded as well and will be shared online. But thank you very much, and I'm just going to hand over to Enda for the last word.
Thanks, Gavin. So maybe just some reflections, guys. I think the first one is just fantastic progress. When you look back at the original KPIs, almost all have been delivered. The majority have been exceeded. And I think it's fair to say, like, the amount of work achieved, absolutely outstanding. So that's really impressive. I think it's also important to show, and I think people have seen it, look, it's a really science-based project. It's data-driven. So I think, no one can argue with the approach. It's robust. And that's really, really important to state as well. Just in terms of the learnings, I think they've been, like I said, huge across the board, from biodiversity to the work on the feed additives, to renewable energy, to the fertilizer, where there's a great story. I suppose the monitor farmers, they're the early adopters of the tech and interventions. And, they've been a big part of the project, I suppose, working with the farm, and a big thank you to them for their facilitation and insights throughout the project. I think you'll see that the approach is genuinely holistic, and the learnings, I believe, augur well for the sector. We have reasons to be optimistic, and I know there's a lot of negative press, but I think this project shows we have real reasons to be optimistic, and that's worth calling out. A key theme to the project is collaboration. I mean, it's absolutely at the heart of the project. And we've been very, very fortunate from the get-go. we have a brilliant team, and I haven't got time to go through the whole academic team and partners, but you know, guys, you've been phenomenal. Your insights and commitment have been outstanding. I would even say inspirational. So thank you very, very much. We've had some brilliant tech partners in the project, and we look forward to working with you in the next phase. I have to call out the farm, particularly Kevin Hearn, who's doing a phenomenal job on the farm. He saw the actual performance of milk solids this year is testament to Kevin's great work, and Gus, and also I think John Mack and Padraig deserve a call out, the local Teagasc guys. We're very fortunate to have you guys because, you know, as has been touched on, Shannock is a commercial dairy farm, and there's a real life farm in action here. So it's been kind of disruptive at times with all the visitors, and Gavin touched on all the visitors we've had, which is brilliant. But you've been very, very good to us, and we really appreciate it. Have to mention SFI, Science Foundation Ireland. I suppose you know, winning the Zero Emissions Challenge 3 years ago, that was transformative. That €2 million we got was massive. So huge thanks to SFI. I suppose more recently, AIB have come on board. Delighted to have them on board as our financial partner. And of course, Biorbic and Kevin have been there from the very, very get-go. So they've been brilliant to us. Want to just say a quick thanks to Mary Kate. There's a lot of the dirty work behind the scenes. You've been brilliant, but I suppose someone I really have to call out this morning, guys, is Gavin Hunt, our project manager. Gavin, you've been brilliant. I suppose most people know at this stage, Gavin is going traveling in the new year. But you know, as a project manager, Gavin, the best thing I could say is that we couldn't have got anyone better. You've been brilliant for the project. You're a real glue, I think, bringing the whole team together. So we're sorry to see you go, but I've no doubt we'll see you back in the near future. Finally, just looking ahead, look, I mentioned a reference phase 2. That's starting in earnest in January. So again, I suppose the model is slightly changing in terms of the partnership. So we're going to have co-funding with SFI through Biorbic. So again, AIB are on board, as well as Carbery, and we'll have some other industry partners as well. So we will do everything possible to deliver on climate neutrality. I suppose, you know, exciting aspects of that will be the AD and biorefinery project. And I think overall, there's exciting times ahead. Like I mentioned, I suppose the sector does get some negative press, but I think we've reasons to be really optimistic, and yeah, really looking forward to phase 2. So that's it for me, Gavin.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Inda. That's us. And look, as a reminder, this is recorded as well, so it'll be available on Carbery and Biorbic social media channels where to find it. Thanks, everyone.
All the best.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers.